Hey guys, I wanted to make a video just discussing the history of the Bible. So, I've made a few videos on this already, so this video is going to be particularly geared towards the language. The English language is a young language in comparison to the original Greek, which is what the New Testament was written in, and the Hebrew that the Old Testament was written in. So the I'm speaking in regards to the Bibles that we have now. In the 1300s was when Wycliffe translated the Bible from the Latin, and then several years later, at the fall of the Byzantine Empire, a lot of those manuscripts started flooding over into Europe while people fled those areas. That would be like what we call the people who are fleeing a country. I can't think of the word right offhand. Refugees. So refugees were coming in and they're running, and so a guy by the name of Erasmus started getting his hands on some of the Greek copies that were coming out of the Byzantine Empire. And those were the old Greek manuscripts. And he began putting a book together, and he put the Latin right next to the Greek. And he had a big, thick book, right? And he put it through several revisions. So I believe he put it through 5 revisions in his lifetime, with that Greek and Latin right next to each other. And that eventually became the Textus Receptus, and that was the New Testament that was used in the King James Bible. And then the the Hebrew manuscripts were they actually weren't originally in the Hebrew Chaldee. The original the original Hebrew language was actually more pictorial than when the Assyrians came and took over northern Israel, and then and that was in 722 BC, and they were taken away in 3 deportations. And then southern Judah was eventually carried away by Babylon in 586 BC. So somewhere in that transition of taking over, it actually became the the Hebrew Chaldee, because they used the Chaldean letters. The original Hebrew didn't even look like the Hebrew that's actually used now. And I'll grab that for you. So the original Hebrew actually didn't even used to look like this right here in the manuscripts that we have in this interlinear Bible, because they simply just use different characters in this. So um, back to Erasmus, after he put those books through the revisions during that same his lifetime, Martin Luther had began to get his hands on the revisions that Erasmus was doing, and this was basically heretical. I'm surprised the Roman Catholics didn't kill Erasmus, but I guess because he was a good Catholic, oh, I'll do what you say. Maybe I don't really know too much about Erasmus, but I can't imagine if he was taking a stand, they wouldn't have killed him for doing that. So he was actually making corrections, like instead of penance, he put repent, because penance means you pay your way out. So Martin Luther started getting his hands on this, and Martin Luther spoke German, and he translated that Greek and the original Hebrew into German. Before that, the only thing people had was the Latin Vulgate, which was translated, I believe, in the 4th century by Saint Jeremy. It looks like Jerome, Jerome. He translated the Hebrew and Greek into Latin. And then the Latin became like the only one that was allowed to be used for 1,000 years until the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Erasmus gets his hands on those, puts the Greek and Latin next to each other, and then Martin Luther translates the Hebrew and Greek into German. So those Hebrew and Greek copies became known as the Textus, that are actually the Greek that Erasmus put together is called the Textus Receptus. It's basically been uniformly accepted that the Hebrew was just the accepted text. So from there, William Tyndale translated the Bible into English from the Hebrew and the Greek. Tyndale was a very skilled man in the language. He was a they call him a language smith because he was taking he knew Latin, he knew German, he knew Hebrew, he knew Greek, and he was comparing them. And the reason that his work still survives, even in the King James Version till this day, is because there wasn't a better way to translate it than what Tyndale had done. I mean, Tyndale did an immaculate translation. The people who did the KJV translated William Tyndale's work from Genesis to Second Chronicles, and from Matthew to Revelations. He translated all those, and he did the book of Jonah. And so when Tyndale did his, he only got that much done before they killed him, and they some people say he was strangled and burned at the stake, but he was at least burned at the stake for translating the Bible. You couldn't do it, especially into English, because English was a poor man's tongue, and they thought that that was filth compared to the Latin. And the Latin, the Roman Catholics wouldn't let anybody translate outside of that. And plus, this was during the times of the Inquisition was on, right? You mess around, they'll burn you, they'll kill you, they'll do bad things to you, which was a big problem for when my kids are out there, my wife's out there, so she's got them. So that was a big problem for the Indians, right? Because during these same kind of time frames, there's a lot going on with the Indians, and Christopher Columbus went over there, and that was a couple hundred years before, but during the Inquisition, which was a big problem for the Indians, you don't want someone stepping off on your land and the full Inquisition. So, and they killed the Indians and chopped their arms off, and did all kinds of horrible stuff to them. That's why anytime you see Christopher Columbus, you see the big red Maltese cross. But so we got the English Bible. Tyndale translated the Hebrew and Greek, and Wycliffe had used the Latin. So the Hebrew and Greek from Tyndale was the first time the Hebrew and Greek had been put into English. Formerly, through Wycliffe and the Layards, it had only been from the Latin translations. So what happens is Tyndale's Bible's outlawed, so Miles Coverdale finishes the translation, and that goes into what they call the Matthew's Bible. And I believe it was a man by the name of Rogers. He had been able to do it because they passed some laws where he could, to actually put the English Bible into all the churches, because of King Henry VIII split. He made the Anglican Church, because they wouldn't let him marry Anne Boleyn, or divorce his wife, because she wouldn't have his heir, or she couldn't have his heir, so he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. So that happens, and they call it the Matthews Bible, but they put a big WT in it for William Tyndale as a dedication to him and his hard work. And then they go to the Great Bible, and then they have like something called the Bishop's Bible, and then even the Geneva Bible's in circulation. So those are the Tyndale Bible's great, his New Testament, and even the Matthews Bible. There's a lot of good, solid translation in that, which is the Bible had already been translated by the time it got to the King James Version. The King James Version is just a plagiarized, twisted version that was twisted to suit the crown and the royal power that was being yanked away from the Roman Catholic Church because of this council that King James did. And they even tried to blow up King James in the gunpowder plot. Look up the gunpowder plot because they tried to blow up all of the important royalty and noblemen who were involved with that and involved with the government at that time. It was called the gunpowder plot. And so that's how we got that word church, because William Tyndale put the word congregation, and that's even too strong of a word because Jesus said, "Where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them." And in Revelation, he said, "I'm in the midst of the candlesticks." And Christ is in his church. He's walking amongst his believers. And so that word church is exactly what the church is. The church is the church, and it has nothing to do with the gathering. So when you see the word church in your Bible, just put a big X through it or a mark, or scribble it out so you don't have to look at it, and put gathering. And just as a reminder, you could put the little verse next to it: "Where two or more are gathered in my name, there I'm in the midst of them." So the King James didn't like the word tyrant, like in Genesis 6:4, so he had that done away with, and he had giant tucked in there. And so he used giant because he was a tyrant. Kings are tyrants in the Bible, the whole way, all the way up till you get to 1 Samuel chapter 8. God is king. God has always been king. No one else has ever been king. Look up the Greek word sunergos. It's like in Romans 8:28, where it says, "We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are the called according to his purposes." Go into Blue Letter Bible, type in the search engine Romans 8:28. When it comes up, click on Romans 8:28. You might have to click on it again, and then it'll break it down and look at work together, and it'll say sunergos out to the side. Click on that and scroll down, and then it'll show you everywhere where sunergos is mentioned, and God works together with his gathering. That's what the synergy in the Bible means. Synergy comes from sunergos. I wanted to share these things with you, and there's one more fact that would be very important: is that the reason the Puritans were wanting to get out of England and come to America is because they did not have a place in that translation for King James. They understood that the king control was wicked because God is in control. He's in control of his gathering. That's why they wanted to come over to America, where they weren't oppressed by all the different religions over there. I don't know all of them, but I'd say like the Presbyterians, because are like the Episcopal. They didn't like the Episcopal thing because they knew that was their link to the king. And I'm not talking about the Greek word episkopos, because we know that believers do have oversight in the church, but the way they set up bishops, and that's the Latin word that they put over episcopo, episcope, because the bishop is tied to the crown and the king, just like church. So church, bishop, king, those aren't good biblical concepts, you can just scratch church out. Like I said, that word is a joke. Kuriakon means the Lord's house, but it's not talking about the gathering. It's talking about the emporium, which is where they lay out the goods and they sell Jesus Christ as though, and they can only sell the other Jesus because the real Jesus isn't for sale. He's already chosen his people and he's chosen his elect, and all that the Father giveth me will come to me, he says. And wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I'm in the midst of them. That has nothing to do with these buildings they call churches. Down at the buildings they call churches, they have another Jesus there in Second Corinthians chapter 11. It talks about another Spirit, another Jesus, another gospel. And then at the end of that same verse, it actually says, you might well bear with him, but Paul is actually saying you might well bear with me, not with like some pagan guy who's preaching another Jesus, another Spirit, another gospel. So that can be confusing for some people. But it was confusing for me, so that's why I had to look up the answer. So just understand the history of the Bible, and if, like, for example, if I tell you a Hebrew or a Greek word, you know that I'm actually saying it because of the understanding of the history of where these things come from. I'm not just like trying to confuse you, and like you'll bump into KJV only, and they literally believe that King James was inspired by God on his board of translators, which I understand that God was in control, but I also understand how it's like they say, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It was a power ploy. He was taking power from the Roman Catholics, and he was setting himself up in charge of the church. He couldn't speak out against them. That's why the Puritans didn't have a voice. You can't speak out against the king, and he's in charge of the church, and you're trying to tell him that he has no authority in the church, and neither do any of the bishops because Christ is in control of the church. They would have go out there and chop your head off as a Puritan. That would be nuts. You can't do that. I mean, you could, but you would be martyred, and we're supposed to stand up for the truth like that. But admittedly, it would be scary, right? I don't think anyone immediately wants to die right off like that. But God willing, we will have the strength when the time comes to resist those wicked powers like that. So, and a martyr means a witness. So just tell them the truth, and they'll kill you for telling the truth. Like, hey, king, you have no power. Hey, pope, what in the world? What do you think you have? You got nothing. You have no power. And then they take you out and chop your head off with a guillotine or something, right? Or torture you for 18 months, like the things they do to John Huss or William Tyndale, because they wouldn't submit to the powers that be. But they were submissive to Christ, and that's what's important. Submit to Christ fully. And so Hebrew and Greek, there's plenty of lexicons, and like a Strong's Concordance, Cassinius, Thayer, people who will explain to you that Yahweh is God, contrary to this false church system that preaches another spirit, another Jesus, and all of that. So just keep those things in mind, and I hope that a little bit of this history has helped you to understand how we got here and how we even got to the things that have been superimposed upon our reality because of the history. History comes into our reality now because this is the one moment that we live in. There is no other moment. So I really appreciate the oneness that we have because of the fact that God has given us this time to live in, and He's given us our brothers. And I appreciate the men that God sets in my way to try me and prove me to see if I'll fall after that wickedness, because God knows my heart and God knows the hearts of my brother, and we got to take those stands and bear one another up against these wicked men in our present time. And God willing, we'll speak. And all right, So thank y'all for watching. Have a good one. Bye.